Hey guys, hate to be the bearer of bad news, though I'm sure most of you have heard already about the passing of Oscar-winning actor Robert Duvall, who died today at the age of 95. And this was insane, actually, because I woke up this morning and I decided I was going to watch Rambling Rose with Laura Dern and Diane Ladd, and he's the father in that movie, married to Diane Ladd. And I was like sitting there watching. I'm like, oh, isn't it great to be watching a movie in 2026 and Robert Duvall is still with us? And then literally near the end of the movie, I get texted that he died, and it was like, uh-oh, like you can't think this stuff because then it just kills people. But no, in all seriousness, though, the timing of that was just so bizarre and just so cosmic in a way. And even though I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of that movie, the last scene of the film with Duvall, I think I maybe enjoyed it a little bit more, considering the circumstances at the moment. And I think it really was the perfect film of his to watch, to coincide with his death. Because there's no beating around the bush here. This guy was a consummate professional, one of the most reliable and consistently great actors throughout his 60-plus year career. I mean, the fact that this guy's film debut was Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird, I mean, come on, like, how can you start any higher than that? But even with that, he continued to rise in stature and really choose very interesting roles as not only a character actor, but eventually as a leading man. And, that really is something that you don't see all too often, but I think is a mark of just how truly great of an actor and how dynamic and how strong of a presence that Robert Duvall had on screen, especially in his, I'd say, probably his most breakout role as Tom Hagen in The Godfather, which I'm so glad that he got an Oscar nomination for that performance. He really just brought this quiet dignity to the screen in that role, and yet he was so captivating, and he felt so real. I think that was the thing about Robert Duvall. There was a sort of similar to Gene Hackman, there was an everyman quality about him. And this is really interesting too, that him and Gene Hackman were both born a year apart or so in January of their respective years, and they died almost a year later at the same age, at 95. And so it's really weird how different artists' lives parallel each other in such a familiar way. But both of them, I think, are very similar from an artistic standpoint as well, just the qualities that they brought to the screen. But yet, as I think Hackman was more of this boisterous sort of character, which wasn't to say Duvall wasn't. A lot of times he was more reserved. But then, of course, you have him in Apocalypse Now, which is one of his most iconic roles in that smell. I love the smell of napalm in the morning. I mean, come on. That's like one of the most iconic quotes of all time. To me, personally, I think his greatest performance, if you guys have not seen it, is The Great Santini. Not necessarily one of the best movies he ever starred in, but just his depiction of this father using all this pent-up toxic masculinity and how he kind of used that as a domineering force for his parenting. It really is such a complex and dynamic and just captivating performance from Duvall. I could go on and on about how many great movies this guy was in. There's so, like, Network was another one. Of course, not my favorite, but, his Oscar-winning performance in Tender Mercies. The list goes on and on. This guy's career was beyond prolific, and I think the fact that he continued to act well into his late 80s, and I believe, his early 90s as well. It's really amazing that we had this guy around for as long as we did, because, Hackman, of course, retired earlier on, like 20 years or so before he died. But Duvall, he was working up near till the very end, And we're just so blessed to have experienced a talent like his for as long as we did. Yeah, there's no denying, even if he's in a movie that's less than stellar, that you knew he was always going to bring something to the table. Yeah, I had a feeling, though, even though I said that earlier, or I was thinking that earlier in the day, it's cool that he's still around. I had a feeling he was probably going to go very soon. But look, 95, that's nothing to scoff at. That's quite the life to have lived, and to be remembered so widely with such adoration by so many other actors and just people who love movies. Robert Duvall is a legend, absolute iconic cinematic legend that I hope none of us will ever forget. But considering the pedigree of movies that he's in, some of the all-time greatest films, I really don't think that's going to be the case anytime soon. So thank you, Robert Duvall, for everything that you brought to the table and being able to share your gifts with us all. May you rest in peace, and Godspeed.